I stood in the corner of the grand ballroom at the Riverside Country Club, adjusting the black apron around my waist. At 62 years old, I never imagined I would be wearing a catering uniform, pretending to be a server at my own husband's retirement celebration. But there I was, with my silver hair tucked under a dark wig, thick-framed glasses perched on my nose, and enough makeup to fool even my closest friends. My husband had no idea I was there. He thought I was home, resting after what I told him was a migraine. The truth was far more complicated. 3 weeks earlier, I had found a receipt in his jacket pocket. A jewelry store, $14,000, for a necklace I had never seen. After 40 years of marriage, 3 children, and 7 grandchildren, I thought I knew everything about the man I had built my life with. But that receipt told me I knew nothing at all. My name is Margaret, though everyone calls me Maggie. I married my husband right out of college in 1984. We were both 22, full of dreams and hope. He started as a junior accountant at a small firm in Boston. Over the decades, he worked his way up to become the chief financial officer of one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in New England. His retirement party was supposed to be the beginning of our golden years together. Traveling, spending time with grandchildren, finally enjoying the fruits of 40 years of hard work. Instead, I was hiding among the catering staff, watching my husband from across the room, waiting to discover what he was hiding from me. The idea came to me after I hired a private investigator. Yes, at my age, I hired a PI like some character in a detective novel. His name was Frank, a retired police officer who now ran a small investigation firm. He had been following my husband for 2 weeks and had gathered enough information to make my blood run cold. There was another woman, younger, much younger. Her name was Victoria, and she was 41 years old, a pharmaceutical sales representative who had been working closely with my husband for the past 3 years. Frank had photos of them having lunch, walking together in the park, even holding hands outside a hotel in Hartford. But I needed to see it for myself. I needed to hear the truth from his own lips before I decided what to do next. The country club's manager was an old friend of mine. We had served on the library board together for 15 years. When I called her and explained the situation, she agreed to help me. She provided the uniform, the access, and the perfect cover story. As I circulated through the ballroom with a tray of champagne flutes, I watched my husband work the room. He looked handsome in his navy suit, his silver hair perfectly styled, his smile warm and confident. At 64, he was still the charming man I had fallen for in college. But now I saw that charm differently. Now I wondered how many lies that smile had hidden over the years. The company had spared no expense for his retirement party. There were over 200 guests, including executives, board members, longtime colleagues, and their spouses. A live jazz band played in the corner. The tables were decorated with elegant centerpieces. Everyone was celebrating 40 years of dedication and service. Everyone except me. I spotted her the moment she walked in. Victoria. She was tall and slender, with auburn hair that fell past her shoulders and a designer dress that probably cost more than my first car. She carried herself with the confidence of a woman who knew she was beautiful and used it to her advantage. My husband's face changed the moment he saw her. I had been watching him all evening, and this was the first time I saw genuine emotion in his eyes. He excused himself from the group of executives he was talking to and made his way toward her. I moved closer, pretending to collect empty glasses from a nearby table. He took her hands in his and kissed her cheek. It was not a professional greeting. It was intimate, familiar, the kind of kiss that spoke of countless private moments between them. "You made it," he said, his voice warm with affection. "I wouldn't miss your big night," she replied, "though I wish we could celebrate privately later." My stomach turned, but I forced myself to remain calm. I had suspected, I had seen the evidence, but hearing it confirmed in his own words was something else entirely. "Soon," my husband promised. "After tonight, everything changes. I've already talked to the lawyer." "The lawyer?" My heart stopped. "What lawyer? For what?" "And Margaret?" Victoria asked. "Does she suspect anything?" "Not a thing. She's at home with a headache. Poor thing, she's been so stressed lately. She has no idea what's coming." Victoria laughed, a light, tinkling sound that made me want to throw my tray of glasses at her. It's almost sad, isn't it? 40 years, and she never saw it coming. Margaret is a good woman, my husband said, and for a moment I thought I heard a hint of guilt in his voice. But she's not you. She never was. I should have done this years ago. I retreated to the service area before they could notice me staring. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the tray. In the kitchen, I leaned against the wall and tried to breathe. 40 years. 3 children. 7 grandchildren. A lifetime of memories, holidays, struggles, and joys. And it meant nothing to him. He was planning to leave me for a woman young enough to be our daughter. But what hurt most was not the betrayal. It was the calculation behind it. He had waited until his retirement, until his pension and stock options were fully vested, until his golden parachute was secured. He was going to leave me after extracting every possible benefit from our partnership. I spent the rest of the evening gathering information. I eavesdropped on conversations, observed interactions, and pieced together the full picture of my husband's double life. From a group of younger executives near the bar, I learned that Victoria was not just his mistress. She was positioning herself to become his business partner in a new consulting firm he was planning to launch after retirement. A firm that would leverage his decades of pharmaceutical industry contacts to generate millions in consulting fees. From the HR director, whom I overheard talking to another executive, I learned that Victoria had been promoted 3 times in the past 3 years, each time with my husband's strong recommendation. Her salary had nearly tripled. And from an older colleague of my husband's, a man named Robert, who had known him since the beginning of his career, I learned the most devastating detail of all. "Between us," Robert said to another guest, thinking no one was listening, "I always knew he married Margaret for her family connections. Her father was on the board of 3 major companies back then. That's how he got his first big break. Without her family, he'd still be a junior accountant somewhere." I set down my tray and walked out of the ballroom. I had heard enough. In the ladies' room, I removed the wig and glasses and looked at my reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back at me was 62 years old with silver hair, lines around her eyes, and a broken heart, but she was also strong. She had raised 3 successful children, managed a household for 4 decades, volunteered countless hours to her community, and built a life she could be proud of. And she was not going to let a cheating husband take that away from her. I left the country club without confronting my husband. I needed time to think, to plan, to protect myself and my children's inheritance. Emotion would only cloud my judgment. Over the next few weeks, I became a different person. The trusting wife who had never questioned her husband's late nights or business trips was gone. In her place was a woman on a mission. I started with the finances. My husband had always handled our money. I had access to the accounts, but I had never paid close attention to the details. Now I scrutinized every statement, every investment, every transaction. What I found shocked me. Over the past 5 years, my husband had been slowly transferring assets out of our joint accounts into accounts in his name only. Real estate holdings, investment portfolios, even a vacation property in the Bahamas that I knew nothing about. He had been preparing for this divorce for years, systematically hiding assets to minimize what I would receive in a settlement. I also discovered that the consulting firm he was planning to start was already incorporated, with Victoria listed as co-owner. The company had already received its first client contract worth $2 million, a contract that should have been disclosed as a conflict of interest while he was still employed. Armed with this information, I contacted a divorce attorney. Not just any attorney, but the best in the state. Her name was Patricia Chen, and she had a reputation for protecting women in high-asset divorces. When I showed her what I had found, she smiled the way a chess master smiles when they see checkmate 3 moves ahead. "Mrs. Reynolds," she said, "your husband has made some serious mistakes. Hidden assets, undisclosed business interests, potential breach of fiduciary duty to his employer. We're not just talking about a favorable divorce settlement, we're talking about criminal exposure." But I was not done gathering information. I remembered what I had overheard at the party about my husband waiting until his retirement benefits were fully vested. I contacted a friend who worked in corporate law and asked about the implications. The answer was enlightening. If my husband's employer discovered his undisclosed business relationships and conflicts of interest before his retirement was finalized, they could terminate him for cause. No pension, no stock options. No golden parachute. 40 years of careful career building, gone in an instant. I now had leverage. The question was how to use it. The answer came from an unexpected source. My husband's employer, the pharmaceutical company, was in the middle of a major merger. The deal was worth billions, and any scandal involving a senior executive could derail the entire transaction. The CEO, a woman named Sandra Mitchell, had built her career on integrity and corporate governance. If she learned about my husband's secret business dealings, she would not hesitate to act. Through my attorney, I arranged a meeting with the company's general counsel. I presented the evidence of my husband's conflicts of interest, his undisclosed business relationships, and his plans to use company contacts for personal gain. The meeting was brief. Within a week, the company had launched an internal investigation. Within 2 weeks, my husband was informed that his retirement celebration had been premature. He was being terminated for cause, effective immediately. The news hit him like a thunderbolt. I was in the kitchen when he came home that day, his face pale, his hands trembling. He looked like a man who had just watched his entire world collapse. "Margaret," he said, sinking into a chair, "something terrible has happened." I poured myself a cup of tea and sat across from him. "Tell me about it." "The company. They're saying I violated my employment agreement. They're taking everything. My pension, my stock options, my severance, 40 years of work, and they're treating me like a criminal." I sipped my tea and waited. "I don't understand how this happened," he continued. "Someone must have turned me in, someone who knew about my plans for the consulting firm." "Maybe someone who attended your retirement party?" I suggested. "Someone who overheard you talking about it?" He looked at me, confused. "I was careful. I only discussed it with people I trusted." "People like Victoria?" The color drained from his face. "How do you know about Victoria?" I set down my teacup. "I know everything. I know about the affair. I know about the business you were planning to start together. I know about the assets you've been hiding for years. I know about the property in the Bahamas. I know about the $14,000 necklace you bought her, and I know that you've been planning to divorce me and leave me with nothing after 40 years of marriage." He stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. "How?" "I was there. At your retirement party. Working as a server. I heard every word." The silence that followed was the longest of our marriage. "Margaret, I can explain." "No," I said calmly. "You can't. There is no explanation that makes this acceptable. You used me for my family connections when we were young. You built your career on the foundation I provided. And when you no longer needed me, you planned to discard me like a worn-out tool. That's not true. I loved you. I still love you. You don't know what love is. Love is loyalty. Love is honesty. Love is putting someone else's needs before your own selfish desires. You have never loved anyone but yourself." I stood up and walked to the door. "My attorney will be in contact. I suggest you find a good lawyer. You're going to need one." The divorce was finalized 6 months later. Thanks to the evidence I had gathered and the company's termination of my husband's employment, the settlement was more favorable than I had dared hope. I received the house, a significant portion of our investment portfolio, and alimony that would ensure my financial security for the rest of my life. My husband, meanwhile, faced not only the loss of his career and marriage but also a civil lawsuit from his former employer for breach of contract. Victoria, realizing that he was no longer the wealthy, powerful man she had attached herself to, disappeared from his life within weeks of his termination. But this story does not end with revenge. That would be too simple, too bitter. A year after my divorce, I reconnected with someone from my past. His name was Thomas, and we had dated briefly in college before I met my husband. He had become a professor of literature at a small university in Vermont, had been widowed 5 years earlier, and had reached out after hearing about my divorce through mutual friends. Our first conversation lasted 4 hours. Our first dinner date lasted 6. By the end of the first month, I knew that what I felt for Thomas was something I had never truly experienced with my husband. It was genuine connection, mutual respect, and a love that expected nothing in return. Thomas did not care about my family connections or my financial situation. He cared about the books I read, the thoughts I had, the person I was beneath the surface. He listened when I talked about my grandchildren. He held my hand when I cried about the betrayal. He made me laugh in a way I had not laughed in decades. We married on a small beach in Maine, with only our children and grandchildren present. I was 64 years old, and I had never been happier. As for my former husband, I heard through mutual friends that he eventually pulled himself together. He moved to a small town in Florida, started working as a financial consultant for small businesses, and even remarried a woman his own age. I hoped, for his sake, that he had learned something from the experience, that he had finally understood the difference between using people and loving them. I do not hate him. Hatred requires too much energy, and I have better things to do with my remaining years. I have grandchildren to spoil, books to read, and a husband who looks at me like I am the most beautiful woman in the world, even with my silver hair and wrinkled hands. But I also learned something important from that experience. No matter how old you are, no matter how long you have been with someone, you should never stop paying attention. Trust is earned, not assumed, and it is never too late to start over. 3 years have passed since that night at the country club when I discovered the truth about my husband. 3 years of healing, growing, and rediscovering who I am outside of a marriage that was never what I thought it was. Last month, my youngest granddaughter asked me what advice I would give to someone who discovered their partner was cheating. I thought about it for a long moment before answering. First, I said, feel all the feelings. The anger, the sadness, the betrayal. Don't push them away. They're telling you something important. Second, gather information before you act. Knowledge is power, especially in situations where someone is trying to take advantage of you. Third, surround yourself with people who love you. You're going to need them. And finally, never forget your own worth. Someone else's betrayal is not a reflection of your value. It's a reflection of their character. She nodded, her young face serious. But Grandma, how do you forgive someone who hurt you so badly? I smiled and took her hand. Forgiveness isn't about them, sweetheart. It's about you. It's about letting go of the anger so it doesn't poison your own heart. I forgave your grandfather not because he deserved it, but because I deserved peace. She hugged me then, and I held her close, grateful for the life I had built from the ashes of the one that was destroyed. Tonight, Thomas and I are sitting on our porch in Vermont, watching the sunset over the mountains. He is reading a book of poetry. I am writing this story. The air is cool, and the leaves are just starting to change color. What are you writing? He asks, without looking up. The story of the night I wore a catering uniform to my husband's retirement party. He chuckles. Still the most badass thing I've ever heard. I smile and keep writing. Because some stories need to be told. Not for revenge, not for pity, but as a reminder that life can surprise you at any age, that endings can become beginnings, and that the best chapters of your story might still be waiting to be written. Did you like this story? And where are you listening from? Let us meet in the comments. If you enjoyed this story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I am looking forward to your comments. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There is so much more on my channel. Do not forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.